Welcome to Spooky History. In today's episode, we're looking at the curse of the pharaohs. Frequently known as the mummy's curse, it befalls any who disturb the tomb, and certainly the corpse of an ancient Egyptian mummy. Said curse instantly lands on their shoulders, sometimes with fatal consequences. And heaven help you if that mummy was royalty, because then you are royally screwed. Hardly surprising, considering that most expensive bounties for tomb raiders and thieves belong to the pharaohs. What did this curse do? Well, you've got your endless saga of average misfortunes like Monday morning traffic, stubbing your toe and broken toilets, to something more serious like sickness, injury or disease. And then you've got what truly immortalised this legend, the gravest of consequences, as in the grave. Some well-meaning researchers postulated the curse was in fact biological in nature, caused by a mould on mummies called Aspergillus, along with the bacteria Pseudomonas and Staphylococcus in the tomb foundations. But those theories didn't stand up to scientific scrutiny for long. So what about actual documented curses inscribed on or in ancient tombs? Yes, we've all heard of King Tutankhamun and some horrific curse dooming everyone who so much as peed in the direction of his tomb. We'll get on to that. But first, step back a second and spare a thought for some other scary examples lurking in his shadow. 1699, Louis Pénichet's alleged report of a Polish man who purchased a pair of Egyptian mummies from Alexandria and went to sea with them in the cargo. During the journey, he was plagued by repeated visions of two ghost-like figures until he ordered the mummies thrown overboard. More official accounts of alleged curses began in the 19th century. The tomb of Kentiki Ekeki, 9th to 10th dynasty, "As for all men who shall enter this my tomb, impure, there will be judgment, an end shall be made for him. I shall seize his neck like a bird, I shall cast the fear of myself into him." Fact is, with tomb curses, if you go looking around every ancient Egyptian burial site, you may actually be disappointed. Why wouldn't they be there though? Well, desecration too unbearable to fathom wasn't considered, and they didn't want to tempt fate by inscribing it either. Zahi Hawass, Egyptologist. On the day he moved artifacts from Greco-Roman Com Abu Billou excavation site, his cousin died, his uncle died a year to the day later, then 3 years to the day his aunt died. On the tombs of the builders of Giza pyramids, "All people who enter this tomb, who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." His works would literally come back to haunt him yet again when he was tormented by regular nightmares of two mummified children he'd helped publicly display in a museum. A kind of exhibit he'd later denounce out of respect for the dead, especially since his nightmares only ceased following the acquisition of their likewise mummified father. Ankhti's tomb, 9th to the 10th dynasty. "Any ruler who shall do evil or wickedness to this coffin, may He-Man not accept any goods he offers, and may his heir not inherit." I assume it's a different He-Man.
Guess again, lobster lips.
Preceding the Old Kingdom, the frequency of curses dropped but their nastiness increased. "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of a pharaoh. They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." Sometimes I wonder if, assuming there was any curse, you could really blame those ancient Egyptians for having such a chip on their shoulder. All that trouble to get into the afterlife, a perfectly built tomb with all the comforts they'd need in the underworld, or at least a burial site that couldn't get any more personal and respected at the time, and what happens? One day a bunch of ambitious men stamped on through. This photograph from 1923 shows archaeologists dining inside the tomb of Ramesses XI. Howard Carter is second from the right. Did they use one of its corners as a toilet as well? I wouldn't be surprised. Not that I wouldn't want to explore it myself, but just to give you an example of their respect and sensitivity. In the early 1920s, philanthropist Sir Bruce Ingram was reportedly given a paperweight from the famous Egyptologist and friend, Howard Carter. Said paperweight was a mummified hand, bearing a scarab bracelet. On that bracelet was the inscription, "Cursed be he who moves my body, to him shall come fire, water and pestilence." Fire, water and... okay. No, I wouldn't have worried, and neither did Ingram. At least not till his house was destroyed by fire shortly after. Coincidence? Maybe. Oh, and by the way, they rebuilt it. And apparently then it got flooded as well. Now, without much further ado, the one you've been waiting for. Everywhere the glint of gold. These famous words, immortalised by Howard Carter, Egyptologist team leader for the excavation of the legendary burial site of you-know-who. And being the cool, bloodthirsty folk we are, we'll deftly skip over the gold this, gold that bit and dive straight into the scary stuff. On your marks, get set, go! November 29th, 1922, the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun is opened in the Valley of the Kings. The same day, Howard Carter sends a messenger, some sources say his colleague James Breasted, to his house. When the messenger gets there, he hears a faint, almost human cry, then finds a cobra in the birdcage eating Carter's pet canary. The cobra, classic Egyptian symbol of royalty. Almost 3 months later, excavation sponsor the Earl of Carnarvon, George Herbert, is overly jovial and flippant upon entering the tomb. A visitor at the site sarcastically remarks to journalist H.V. Morton, "I give him 6 weeks to live." 6 weeks later, April 1923, the Earl is dead. Blood poisoning. A mosquito bite he'd infected while shaving. 5 months later, his brother Aubrey dies of sepsis. 1 month later in May, another visitor to the site, George J. Gould, contracts a fever during the trip and dies in France. 1924. The man who allegedly x-rayed the mummy itself, Sir Archibald Reed, dies only days later. One of many archaeologists visiting the site, Hugh Evelyn White, commits suicide. 1926. Egyptologist Aaron Ember, colleague and witness to the tomb's opening, dies in a house fire. 1928. One of Carter's excavation team, A.C. Mace, dies of arsenic poisoning. 1929. Carter's secretary Richard Bethel dies in suspicious circumstances, possibly smothered in bed, followed by his father a year later who committed suicide. The curse of the pharaohs mythos was undeniably boosted by the excavation of Tut's tomb. It was one of the few to have never been raided by thieves, meaning all the riches were untouched for 3,000 years, and the press had a field day. The sensationalism was aided by novelist Marie Corelli, who threw in her tuppence worth by writing that a most dire punishment follows any rash intruder into a sealed tomb. Even the fanciful mind of Arthur Conan Doyle noseyed in, theorising that Lord Carnarvon's death was no accident but influenced by ancient elementals at the site. However, Carnarvon had already been suffering from serious chest infections, hence pneumonia from the blood poisoning was his death warrant. Nor was any mould or bacteria to blame, which would have finished him off a lot quicker. Even Howard Carter himself was entirely opposed to foolish superstitions, and described them as tommy rot. But let's suppose there was a curse. Precisely how much damage did it do? There were many visitors present at excavation. To how many did it bring death and misfortune within, say, a dozen years? All? 20? Half? Sure you want to know? Careful what you wish for, because it so happens the British Medical Journal can help you out. In 2002, a study was conducted with the objective of examining the survival of individuals exposed to the mummy's curse, reputedly associated with the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun. The results were, between February 1923 and November 1926, of the 25 Westerners potentially exposed to the curse, the average age of death was 70. In other words, it's looking a bit tumbleweeds on the evidence scale, dear. As for Howard Carter, who in the movies would most probably be first to die, his pulse ticked away just fine for the next 20 years till his death in 1939. And if you're not yet disappointed enough, horror freaks, here's a final sting in the tail. Contrary to rumours and early media reports, no curse of any sorts has ever been found inscribed anywhere on the exterior or interior of the burial site of King Tutankhamun. Sorry. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, then you can give us a like on Facebook or follow on Twitter and Insta at SpookyHistShow, and of course you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're even on WordPress now for those watching in 2008. If you want to support us and get early access and extra content, you can over at patreon.com/noisyghostents. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching and please do have nightmares. Goodbye.